Right, so hi, I'm Jane and this is Emmanuel, and we're in Emmanuel's kitchen and we're doing something we've not done before. And we're calling this Two Friends in a Kitchen. Sorry, it's a bit of a spin-off from Three Blokes in a Pub.
And we do have coffee, not beer.
Yeah, we've got coffee because it's the middle of the day. So we're here because we want to talk to each other, we want to have a conversation, and we want to share that conversation with other people because of what's been happening in our lives. So before we start, shall I say about how you've influenced me and what I've...
Yeah, well, perhaps a good idea would be to explain your idea, and the name, and
Okay.
Jane's had this really, really important and heartwarming idea as a result of a few events in a whole week, perhaps.
Yeah.
And the events that touched me, and she was touched by it, and she's come up with something that's so important, and we're trying to make it happen now because it needs to.
So I was just explaining to Emmanuel's husband Joe. Hi Joe.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just saying how since Brexit I feel like I've been studying A-level Brexit. But it wasn't until I met you, Em, that I realised the impact Brexit was having on a whole load of people. And I was shocked about how little I knew, really. So the first thing was when you handed out your leaflet. So we were at a Cornwall for Europe event, and that's how we know each other. And and Em handed out a leaflet called In Limbo, and I had vaguely heard of In Limbo, but I went home and looked up what it said on the leaflet, and I looked up this website, the In Limbo website, and I ordered the book, which I've only just started reading, and I was just blown away really by the huge impact Brexit was having on the EU 27 people living here.
Maybe I should come in, just explain. I've come from France. That's where I was born, raised, educated, and I came to this country when I was in my early 20s to study as part of the Erasmus program, and I studied a PhD in Sussex University in Brighton, and ended up staying, working here. I've contributed all my life. My adult life is in Britain, and I never really wanted to get British citizenship because I felt British, but it didn't need to be. I didn't want a collection of passports. I'm a European, and this was Europe, and nothing was needed. Until, of course, the referendum happened, and then it started to be a total nightmare. I'm married, I've got 2 children, married to a British husband, and our 2 children have got dual nationalities, but we didn't, and it meant overnight I became different. So with my French passport, I was different from my children and my husband, and I just couldn't stomach it. It scared me, and I think 3.2 million people are in that situation, plus their families. I think in the UK it amounts to over 8 million people who are now in limbo, totally in limbo, because nothing's been done. It's not clear what's happening. A lot of people can't get the right papers yet, and so just that background. It is very important that people, and the public here, it's not being shared on the media, it's not being explained at all. The public here just believes that if you're here legally, which by the way we all are, because this is Europe, that will be fine. But it isn't the case. We're not fine. We don't have a status yet. Everything can happen to us. So it is very hard, and it's over 2 years. Very hard.
So, about 2 weeks after I got the leaflet, I listened to you talk, didn't I? And this was in Penzance. And I can honestly say, and this is the honest truth, I can't believe I'm crying this soon in this conversation. But this is the honest truth, that I have not cried in public like that since my dad's funeral. You know, where a big bubble of grief comes up and you can't contain it, and it doesn't matter who's there. It could have been the Queen there, it could have been the BBC there, it could have been... I could have been on a stage, you know, the rest of the world, it didn't matter. I could not hold back that bubble of grief. It just popped in me. And it was because, as you were speaking, I knew that I had lost what I believed to be my own country too, because the country that I love welcomes people like you and doesn't put people like you through huge amount of stress. And I'm sorry that I've only just woken up to that, you know, and I apologise to the Windrush people as well. I do. And I have just woken up to it, and that was you know, it was a moment of grief. And you know what, with grief, I've gone through grief and I know how to handle it, and one way of handling it is doing something. So that's what the next bit of this is about. So a couple of days later, I think it was a few days later, was it, when Theresa May said, accused 3-point-something million people of being queue jumpers. And that to me was a really low day. Since the referendum, it's been the darkest day, because to me that was it. My leader, who's supposed to be representing all of us here, all of us who live in the UK, spoke something that was the opposite to how I feel, and I know millions of other people feel. And I thought, okay, we've got in limbo. I'm British born. I have been trying to find out about Brexit and everything that's been going on, and I have only really just woken up to this, the extent of the trauma that people have been going through. And there needs to be a way for British born people who don't agree with it. There needs to be a way for them to send out a different message. You know, because if our leaders are not saying that message, then we need to be able to say it. So that was my idea, is to create it's not a campaign, it's a message really. It's under the hashtag yellow rose, hence yellow roses. And yellow roses represent friendship. And I'm asking people to send out a hand of friendship to people that are in this position, British-born people, so that the noise about this is not just coming from EU 27 people. You know, I don't even like having to discern between those two things.
Exactly.
I hate it, but we're being forced to.
We used to be EU 28.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah. So if you are a British-born person like me who feels that the EU 27 people are welcome here, and you want to welcome them, then you need to speak out, because our leaders aren't speaking out for us. And the people who are making the most noise in the media are saying the opposite thing. So, however, there are millions of British-born people who want EU 27 people here.
I know. We meet them every day, even if they all say it's not about you, but I just keep saying, well, who is it about then? Because, you know,
it is about you.
It's affected us certainly massively. We still don't know exactly how we're going to be eaten.
So before I say more about how the yellow rose thing could evolve, do you mind telling me a little bit, because I am genuinely still learning what is going on here. Would you mind telling me what you've been through? So leading up to the referendum, day of the referendum, and then what's gone on since then. I mean, just in terms of practical, in terms of emotion. I know it's a massive story.
I mean, it's so before the referendum, really, what happened to me was trying to have those conversations about the vote that was coming, and as a European in this country, people were sometimes asking me about what does Europe do, but then very quickly, when I was trying, because I feel European in my core, is you know, I've always been European since I was born, so that for me it's very important. But when I was trying to tell people that, very quickly it became, oh well, actually we're not asking you because you're not voting, so we don't really want to.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was told, you know, you're not voting, and that really, I should have campaigned before that. I really should have shouted that really, I've spent all my adult life here. I am, you know, I live here, and this referendum was about the whole history of me coming here, my decision, my life, my choices, etc. all came into that ballot paper, but I wasn't allowed to vote. But
did you feel isolated at that point? Because presumably the In Limbo project started after the referendum. Yeah. So before the referendum, did you link up with other people in your position?
Not really. No, at the time. No, we had just moved here. We were just discovering life and our new friends, etc. It was very difficult, actually. And at the time, I don't even think I saw the massive problem about this. The fact that we were not being asked. So anyway, after the referendum, for the reasons I explained, it was, for me, it was very difficult to imagine that I had different papers, a different status from my own children and my husband. I couldn't, it dawned on me that someone up there in the government or whatever, parliament, could one day in the future decide, well, actually, you know, if you are not of this kind of origin, then your pensions will be frozen or something. Anything about my life was then no longer protected. Within the EU, there is a European Court of Justice. We live in each other's countries, but if there is a problem, if we feel that we're not being considered or our rights are not being respected, etc., you've got somewhere to go. But if Britain is no longer in the EU, that disappears and we are left here, and I can't go back. It's not about that. My life is here. My children are in school. I work here. It's not that easy, you know. You can't just.
No. Why should you even be having to think that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not. But because the status changed, I decided to protect myself by getting British citizenship, because I know I'm entitled to it, because I've been a resident here.
France is, we're lucky because France does that, other European nations don't.
I don't understand what you mean.
If you're Austrian, for example, you can't do it.
Yes, so I was able to get...
Roll back a bit and I'll come back to that.
I was able to get British citizenship without losing my French citizenship.
Oh, I see. You could have dual citizenship. Yes, I've heard about this, that if you have British citizenship, some EU 27 then say, oh, well, you've lost
Yeah, in some countries you've got to choose.
Oh.
But again, why? It's not been thought through before because it didn't matter. You didn't need to have British citizenship
Yeah.
to live in Britain.
Yeah.
It's the same for, and some countries have taken the sort of stance that, you know, why accumulate several nationalities when you've got European citizenship? You don't need to have several, and that's why it won't change. If Brexit does happen, these countries will allow dual citizenship. I know they're already discussing it. Because it's no longer equal, it's no longer equivalent. But anyway, so I decided to go through with it. And I don't really want to go into so much detail, but every step of the way I saw cynicism from, and in fact it's like Theresa May was there telling me these things, you know, like, so because
give me one example. Don't have to go through all of it, but give me one example of what you mean by that.
In December 2015, so 6 months before the referendum, she changed. So she was in the Home Office, to be clear. So she's the one responsible for those processes. On how to manage immigration and people asking for those papers. Yeah. So she changed for EU citizens who are spouses to British citizens. Before December 15, you could just go straight to citizenship. Basically, it's a two-stage process. You have to prove that you are resident in the country, and then you have to apply for citizenship. But before December 15, you could just apply for citizenship and prove your residency as a spouse.
Right.
Yeah?
Well, so it was made more complicated, basically.
She introduced this permanent residence card as a first step to getting citizenship. So she introduced that. And that permanent residence card was never designed for Europeans, obviously, because you don't need that in order to, because the free movement means that you can live and work everywhere you want in Europe. So nobody needs a permanent residence card, or needed it from Europe up to that point of the referendum. So once you start looking into the permanent residence, it was a lot more geared for, I suppose, other non-European migrants. Or I don't like migrants, but the people who came into the UK but not from Europe, and it's excruciatingly complicated, and it doesn't because of our rights as Europeans, there were bits and things that we never needed to acquire, but suddenly they become compulsory to apply for this PR card.
So does that mean some people might not have had those things in place then?
No. So there is a huge proportion of Europeans, of these 3 million, that do not have the necessary things in order to acquire permanent residence today. And this is where this was being born, because these books are a collection of testimonies, and all the people that tried to get that permanent residence card in order to safeguard their lives, basically, a large proportion of them just can't. And that's where, lucky for me, I don't know, but one of the things they look at is whether you've worked, for example. But you have to have worked for 5 years without a gap. And, you know, a lot of people, having been here decades, have worked all these years, but sometimes there's gaps.
It does sound, as well, as a woman, that sounds really tough, because it's normally the woman that takes career breaks for various caring roles.
They are being hit harder, I guess. But, you know, you no gaps at all for 5 years. That's, I don't know, just some people just don't have that, and or you can switch to self-employed or students, or it's not just, it's working with P60s basically for 5 consecutive years.
Even if you're married.
Oh, married doesn't come into account at that point.
So it's just this really rigid rule.
Yeah.
However long you've lived here. So if you've lived here 25 years.
Permanent residence doesn't really look at how long you've been here. It just, you need to choose 5 years, qualifying years they call it.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't have to be the 5 most recent.
No. But that, well, I won't go into details, but that was so unclear as well, that really the process, you needed more than a degree. I think.
And did you have anyone to go to for advice, or?
I can't afford it.
Yeah. And how much did the whole thing cost, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, my passport.
From the 2 stages you've said to getting full citizenship, and I think
probably
to add insult to injury, you have to go to a ceremony, don't you, at the end, which I bet you didn't feel like going to. I don't think I would. I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm projecting.
No. It was hard. The whole process cost me probably about £1,800.
Right. So what happens to the people that can't afford that? Is that where this settled status comes in?
So permanent residence and the settled status, but that doesn't exist yet, so we don't know. But it will be about £65 to pay for that. But the problem with that status is that it is not something that you then keep for life. So every time if you have a gap in your residence, then you lose it.
No way.
So this is what my
So if you went back for a year to look after a parent that was dying, say.
Yeah, which you do,
Which
because
you would
of
do.
course you have family elsewhere in the European Union. This is what I joked about at my ceremony. I had to find a lot of... I always look at things in a positive way, I try. So one of the little funny jokes I made was that actually I got citizenship to allow me to leave this country. Because then I can come back.
I see. So one big advantage of having citizenship over settled status
is I can go.
Yeah, I see. Wow.
Because my children are British.
Cool.
So even if I say we went to France now to live for the next few years, etc., they could come back, but I couldn't.
No.
Even
so
though
sorry.
My heart is here. I am British. I was always British. I was, and people say, no, of course you're not, because you're not born here, whatever. That's how I feel. It's part of my identity. It's my identity. And this was the hardest in this. And I think everybody concerned, the EU 27, whatever, but it's suddenly our identity, the way we describe ourselves or define ourselves was taken away from us. And that Theresa May, as Prime Minister, did that as soon as she started the negotiations. Europe said, let's agree that, all citizens can keep the same rights. And she said no.
Right.
It was not.
So at any point where there could have been some reassurance.
Every time,
there wasn't.
The whole point. But the point was that she wants to end free movement. At the time, it was the ECG that is a massive problem to her. Because then we are protected by another higher place. And she doesn't want that.
It's European Court of Justice. Yeah.
Which looks after all citizens in Europe. Looks after their rights and looks after, tells countries. In fact, what I was describing before, so when the permanent residence not being really applicable to EU citizens, they've introduced this, you have to have a health insurance when you are a student or you are not earning, basically. So you could be caring for your own children, etc. You need to then cover yourself with a health insurance. It was never asked, or it didn't really apply to us. But the European Court of Justice, I believe, challenged the UK government for that rule, which is unfair, because you are here, you're contributing to society, and you get the free NHS like everybody else because you are a European citizen. But they introduced it anyway, and they kept saying, well, it's all right because we're not forcing people, because they never asked for permanent residence because they don't need it. So this is how they managed to sneak these things in my opinion, sneaked in, because suddenly when it came to after the referendum and people started applying, then they were stuck with this problem. They couldn't get the papers because of that. So it was there all the time, and not being agreed that it should have been challenged before. They didn't manage, and then it's there.
So the hostile environment is translated into these administrative nightmares, basically. And then the administrative nightmares are translated into a different reality for you, aren't they? Because whereas before you were on an equal footing, you're not anymore, but you're having to prove your residency and your status. So can I ask you something, if it's too upsetting, because the thing that really got to me in your talk was you had to choose between caring about your parents and caring about your children, and I think that was at the point that my bubble burst. I think partly because I've recently been in a situation where I've had to really care for my mum, and the impact on my life was massive. I think a lot of middle-aged women go through this, where they have to cut down their work and they have to choose between spending time with their family or spending time with their elderly relative, and choose between pursuing a career or looking after the elderly relative, and it's huge. And for me, the decision was totally emotional. I couldn't have abandoned my mum.
Yeah.
Whatever the price.
The same.
Yeah, whatever the price, I couldn't do it. So people say to me, "Oh, weren't you good?" Well, no, it wasn't to do with being good. It was to do with what was in my DNA to do. So it wasn't even a choice. So I think that was the thing. For me, it wasn't even a choice because I had to do it. So I think that was the thing probably that pressed my button when you were talking, because I thought,
So it stems from the hostile environment again, saying, okay, it's okay if you can qualify, you get British citizenship to anyone. So from the whole world you can apply to become British if you follow those rules.
Yeah.
But in doing so, they ask you basically to sign that, as a newly British citizen, you are then not allowed your rights that you had in your status before. So as an EU citizen, Europe decides that there's free movement and you can bring your family with you.
Okay, yeah.
Relatives, so that can be, so you can care for it. There is a process that I could bring my parents over to live in my own home and to care for them.
Right.
As an EU citizen, I can do that in Britain. By becoming British, I can no longer do that. It is not allowed for a British person who has relatives elsewhere in the world to bring them to live with them, to care for them. It is not allowed. You have to go through a completely different set of immigration rules. So at the moment, as we are still until the 29th of March, my parents could come as EU citizens and start the process of residence here. But after the 29th of March, I don't know what's going to happen.
So that's one of the unanswered questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I, by becoming British, have now lost the right to bring them to me.
Yeah. So you had to choose between being on the same sort of footing as your children and your husband, or, wow, that's massive. That's massive. Because that wasn't the deal, was it?
No.
That wasn't the deal. When you came here legally, and there was there was a deal, you know, and you've contributed to our society.
A set of rules which I followed. I arrived when in your first year of settling somewhere, you are still covered by your home country. All my NHS treatments. I was 20 something anyway. I didn't, I went to the dentist and I probably had contraception or whatever, but that's it. But France paid for it, paid the UK, and equally when you go abroad, you carry those European health cards.
Yeah.
So to start with, that's the way it goes, and then you start working, so you start putting in tax, and then after that you get your national insurance number, and that's it. It's just there was nothing dodgy about it. It was all written somewhere, and
the other big thing which has been posted a lot recently on Facebook, which I'm pleased to see, because this was something I only found out about, I suppose, a few months after the referendum result, and I am really late to the party, and I apologise because I know there's loads of people who are know loads about Brexit, but I was just trundling along with my life. I voted to remain quite pragmatically. I gave it a weekend. I was really pragmatic about it. I just thought, right, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to look at everything. I had things recorded on the telly. I gave it a weekend, and that was it. And I was pragmatic. And then it was like scales falling from my eyes over months. And I think I'd been spending about before I found you guys, I think I was just buried in a cave somewhere, and I read 3 hours a day. I was reading for about 3 hours a day. And within that A-level Brexit, I discovered that if an EU person who's been here has not, is it right that if they're not financially independent within 3 months, they can no longer stay here? Is that correct? Am I right in that?
So every country in Europe can put that in place, yes.
Yeah, but we didn't.
No.
And so that was one of the things. So basically it seems to me that we didn't do our job properly, and now we're making you guys have to prove your right of being here. So I suppose if we have to talk about nationalities, I think British have got a strong sense of justice. Well, to me that isn't fair. It's not